Welcome everyone, and thank you all for being here today. I am so grateful to have this amazing opportunity to speak with each and every one of you. In my 20 years of law enforcement service, I have attended far too many funerals for public safety officers. Most recently, in my hometown of Santa Cruz, California, I responded in the capacity of a law enforcement chaplain to the murder of Sergeant Damon Gutzweiler with the Santa Cruz County Sheriff's Office. In this same incident, I was subsequently dispatched to the hospital as a chaplain to minister to my dear friend, Deputy Alex Spencer, who was severely injured in this same incident. 5 years ago, I married Alex and his wife, Dory, and I am the godfather to their oldest son, William. Immediately after this event, many of the officers from my department, in addition to officers from the entire county of Santa Cruz, came to me with urgent questions about their faith, life after death, and how to release the painful grasp of memories from their past. Well, needless to say, this incident hit far too close to home. My friends, our nation is clearly in a state of turmoil, and the brave men and women who serve and protect our streets, well, we're under attack. We're under attack mentally, physically, even spiritually. The most alarming and revealing indicator of just how troubling these times are is the overwhelming number of police suicides that our nation experiences each year. For the third straight year in a row, the number of reported police suicides is 3 times higher than the number of officers killed with encounters with violent offenders. My friends, this means that the greatest danger facing law enforcement and all first responders is not out there, but is rather in here. No amount of body armor can protect first responders if the enemy is lurking between our ears. This means that each of you listening today, we form a moral family. We are all deeply invested in protecting those who protect us. This being the case, what can first responders do to increase their chances of victory, both on the street and in their mind? In the winter of 1999, when I was at the inception of my career in law enforcement, a mentor pulled me alongside him and said a few words to me that I will always cherish. He said, "Greg, if you tell me the truth, I will believe you. If you tell me a fact, I will listen. However, if you share a story with me, then I will remember." Well, in the spirit of these proverbial words of wisdom, I have a story to share with you that I call the 5 Stones of Victory. I believe this story holds the key to victory for you in every area of your life. So, my friends, sit back, relax, allow my words to become your words as we embark on a journey together. A young man looked down into a stream at the very bottom of a valley. Above him, high on the hilltop, stood 2 opposing armies. At the highest point on the landscape, having already captured the coveted terrain feature of the high ground, loomed a fearsome giant, covered head to toe in shining bronze armor. This giant was holding a sword the length of a grown man's body. If this young man had taken a few moments to study the reflection of his face in the water, he would have seen a handsome face staring back at him. Perhaps slightly sunburned from long hours being outdoors underneath the hot desert sun. This young man had been described by his friends as strong, brave, handsome, well-spoken. He was known in the community as someone who was loyal to his craft. However, on this day, this young man had not come to the stream to look at his face in water. No. He had come to look for 5 stones. 5 smooth stones, to be exact. You see, this young man was looking for a particular type of smooth, flat stone that would sit perfectly well in the sling that he always faithfully kept with him. This young man had used his sling to great and devastating effect. He had used it to kill a lion and a bear when they had threatened his flock. However, on this day, this young man, he will be fighting a target that walks on 2 feet, not 4. And on this day, his target had not been tormenting animals. His target had been tormenting his friends. Perhaps you recognize this story. I am talking to you of none other than David. David, the man who completely redefined the archetype of the underdog against all odds mindset. My friends, I absolutely love this story. Can you tell? However, as much as I love this story, whenever I think about this story or share this story, a question always comes into my mind. A question always comes into my mind. What's significant about this question is I believe this question holds within it the key to victory in every area of your life. So are you ready for this question? Here we go. What in the world was a shepherd doing with a sling and a shepherd's pouch without a single stone of ammunition? Well, by way of illustration and to help set the proper context for this ancient story, let's use a modern story to compare and contrast the difference between what happened on the battlefield that day and what should have happened on the battlefield that day. Imagine this: an active shooter has just walked onto a school ground covered with school children. Immediately, a 911 call goes out to the dispatch center. The dispatcher immediately notifies a law enforcement officer who, thank goodness, is on patrol less than 1 block away. This officer turns on their lights and siren and immediately starts to drive in the wrong direction. Yeah, wrong direction. The officer goes away from the school en route to a sporting goods store to buy ammunition for their firearm. Yes, they are on duty in a marked patrol vehicle. They have their firearm, they have their duty belt, they even have extra magazines, yet they do not have a single round of ammunition anywhere on their person. Well, come on, that just doesn't make any sense. Neither does a shepherd who has a sling and a shepherd's pouch without a single stone of ammunition. It just doesn't make any sense unless the original author of this ancient story wants you to see something far more important than 5 mundane, random, ordinary rocks. I propose there is something symbolic, something allegorical to these 5 smooth stones, which is why I refer to these 5 stones as the 5 stones of victory. These are the 5 stones, my friends, that we will be investigating together today. They all begin with the letter P. Easy to remember. Number 1, the stone of a peaceful posture. Number 2, the stone of persistent forgiveness. Number 3, the stone of positive mental nutrition. Stone number 4, the stone of proper physical nutrition. And number 5, the stone of physical training. My friends, these are the 5 stones that will unlock victory for you in every area of your life when you gather these stones and store them up in your symbolic shepherd's pouch. Let's take these stones one at a time. The first stone that I want to emphasize for you is the stone of a peaceful posture. As we study this ancient story, it's interesting to assess the terrain features of the battlefield. In the days of close combat, when the tip of a spear and the edge of a sword settled battles, the opponent who would secure the high ground, well, they had a decisive advantage in the battle. And the high ground was precisely the terrain that Goliath, our giant in the story, had acquired. This means that the enemy had acquired the highest terrain, whereas David seemingly retreated to the lowest terrain feature you could find. Geographically speaking, the stream is the lowest place you could go on the battlefield. The temptation we all face whenever we face a giant, whether it is a giant of a job loss, the death of a loved one, a financial setback, the breakup of a loving relationship, or the anxiety caused by a global pandemic, is to immediately get to work doing something. However, our ancient story is a reminder that action and non-action are 2 sides of the same coin. David needed to mentally and physically prepare himself before taking action. In fact, the bigger the physical task or challenge or obstacle or giant that we face in our life, the more rest we need beforehand and afterwards. Rest, recovery, relaxation, rejuvenation, refreshment. These are all ways of saying the same thing. Action and non-action are both very, very important. However, public safety, what side of the coin do you think we tend to overemphasize? Of course, we are masters of action, yet we tend to still be in kindergarten when it comes to matters of non-action. I like the stone of peaceful posture because it reminds me, and hopefully will remind you, that our body and our mind must constantly be put into a state of peacefulness. This is because the body and the mind are intimately connected. When I was serving as a special agent with the Drug Enforcement Administration, the DEA, I had a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to attend a lecture by Colonel David Grossman. David is a retired U.S. Army Ranger, someone who was very, very well respected in the warrior professions for teaching the critical relationship between breathing and mindfulness, between breathing and focused relaxation. During the lecture, David taught me a breathing technique that he refers to as combat breathing. This breathing technique is very important because it helps to center the mind in the present moment. And it results in an increased state of relaxation, mental calm, and focus. Well, a few years after this amazing encounter with Colonel David Grossman, I entered into a mentorship relationship with a gentleman named Commander Mark Devine, a former commander of U.S. Navy SEALs. Incidentally, Mark taught me nearly the same breathing technique that Colonel David Grossman had taught me just a few years earlier. Well, in law enforcement, when two people that you admire teach you nearly the same thing, we refer to that as a clue. The universe was giving me a clue that I needed to pay attention to breathing. Now, I had been an athlete my entire life, yet even with all that athletic training, no one had ever taken the time to teach me how to breathe. When we breathe, the first step is to emphasize breathing through the nostrils. We can do this all the time. There's several benefits to breathing through the nose. Here are a few that might be of interest to you. Number one, when you breathe through the nose, the hair follicles in your nose will either warm or cool the breath, depending on what you need in the moment. Also, those same hair follicles help to purify the breath before it enters your lungs. The nostril breath also helps to pull the breath into the lower diaphragm, making your breathing much more efficient. Well, that's extremely important in athletic training and will be very, very important in our fifth stone, the stone of physical training. Perhaps most importantly, the nostril breath helps to trigger the body's parasympathetic nervous system in a profound way. Speaking of parasympathetic nervous system, let's take just a few moments to talk about the two systems which operate automatically within your body. This is referred to as your body's autonomic nervous system. It operates in two different states, your sympathetic nervous system and your parasympathetic nervous system. Now, these two states, they're both very, very important for first responders. That means you to understand. So please listen carefully. The state of your body's autonomic nervous system determines whether or not you are in a defensive survival mode or whether you are in a rest repair mode. When the body is sympathetic, which is commonly referred to as fight or flight, the nervous system is in a defensive posture, in a survival posture, and in this posture or in this mode of operating, your normal body functions are compromised in a severe way. For example, your digestion stops, making it difficult for you to digest complex foods such as gluten and common allergens. Your immune system function is greatly compromised due to decreased tissue hydration and poor circulation. And number three, body structure compresses at the joints, leading to muscle pain and joint pain. And number four, this is perhaps most important for first responders, memory formation and decision-making ability is critically impacted. It's severely flawed. Well, that doesn't sound good. How can we counteract these harmful effects of this particular system of the body? Well, it's something all of you are doing right now. Breathing, my friends, breathing. When we breathe, we help to trigger the body's parasympathetic state. This is the state the body needs to be in order to repair and regenerate. A healthy nervous system has an optimal balance of both. However, listen carefully, due to the constant stress, danger, anxiety, uncertainty, and long hours of the first responder profession, we tend to operate mainly in a sympathetic state. That sympathetic state over a day, a week, a month, a year, a career can have a devastating effect both on the body and the mind. Therefore, we need the first stone of victory, because the stone of peaceful posture helps us to recalibrate the body and return you to a state of balance and equilibrium. In other words, my friends, what we need to do is learn how to breathe. Now, I know the resistance. You're probably thinking to yourself, I can breathe just fine. Well, I thought the same thing until I had these life-changing encounters with Colonel David Grossman and Commander Mark Devine. So imagine they're here with us in the classroom right now. They'll be teaching right alongside me. So prepare yourself for one of our first whiteboard diagrams. This diagram, as simple as it is, has a special place in my heart, because this is the diagram that Mark Devine gave me when he taught me what he refers to as box breathing. This is nearly the same breathing technique that Colonel David Grossman teaches. It's just that when we box breathe, we focus on breathing through our nostrils for the reasons I've already shared with you. The box helps us remember that every time we breathe, there are 4 parts to the breath: the inhalation, the retention of the breath held in, the exhalation, then the suspension of the breath held out. This is a 4-count breathing exercise. We'll do 1 round together. I'll provide for you the cadence. Wherever you are, take a moment to adjust your physical posture so your spine is nice and straight. You may even like to close your eyes, which further helps to create a state of inner peace. Now, begin by taking a deep breath in. Exhale a slow breath out. Here we go. Inhale for a 4 count. 2, 3, 4. Hold the breath for a 4 count. 2, 3, 4. Exhale for a 4 count. 2, 3, 4. Hold the breath for a 4 count. 2, 3, 4. Great job. Now take a deep breath in. Exhale a slow breath out. If you have your eyes closed, you can open your eyes. Well, great job, everyone. Congratulations on what might have been your first round of box breathing. Over the next few days, whenever you feel your temperature rising, such as sitting in heavy traffic on your way to a code 3 lights and siren type of call, or in the middle of a heated conversation with a loved one, just take a few moments to box breathe. You'll be amazed at how the tension is released from the body and a state of peacefulness comes over you, both in your body and in your mind. My friends, that concludes our lesson on the first stone. Now, let's bring our attention to our second stone of victory. The second stone is the stone of persistent forgiveness. Persistent forgiveness. This is a very, very important stone. You know the old adage, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me? Well, it's just not true. Just not true. Research reveals that the effects of negative self-talk, not to mention the hurtful words of other people, they are extremely toxic and just as harmful as any physical weapon that you face out there on the street. In the context of our ancient story, just a few moments before David engaged Goliath in combat, he was ridiculed and publicly humiliated by his brothers. Therefore, I'd like to think that While gathering stones, David took a deep breath and forgave his brothers. David needed a clear head in order to make decisions on a tense and rapidly evolving battlefield. In other words, David needed to clear his head so he could clearly see his enemy and the totality of the battlefield on that fateful day. In the wise words of the U.S. Army Officer Candidate School, first responders need to expertly shoot, move, and communicate. And in order to do so, the dominant thought in our mind needs to be victory, not defeat. In his book, Man's Search for Meaning, one of my favorite books, Man's Search for Meaning, the brilliant psychologist Viktor Frankl made the conclusive argument that in the space between stimulus and response resides the last human freedom, the ability to make an independent choice. Well, given the abstractness of this principle, allow me to provide you with a helpful diagram. Come on in around the whiteboard for a moment. In our diagram, this circle with the S represents stimulus, whereas this circle with the R represents response. Simple enough, right? Simple enough. Well, here is the breakthrough idea proposed by Viktor Frankl. What he discovered is that it's not important what happens to you. What matters is what you think about what happened. Let me say that one more time, because when I first understood this, it was life-changing. What happens to you is not as important as what you think about what happens to you. In other words, when you change the way you think about something, what you think about begins to change. Now, this is an absolutely astounding principle, my friends. A principle so powerful, I believe it can fundamentally change your life. I really want each and every one of you to grasp this concept. When you utilize the stone of peaceful posture and engage your body's parasympathetic nervous system, you awaken in your mind a faculty that I refer to as free agency. Free agency takes place when there is a little bit of space or a little bit of breathing room between your thoughts. In the space between your thoughts, you are able to discern where you are focusing your attention. You're able to discern whether or not you are enlarging thoughts of victory or you are enlarging thoughts of defeat. I use the phrase enlarging thoughts because your mind is like a giant magnifying glass. You can magnify any thought or belief that you want to. Now, this means that your perception of a situation is always more important than the situation itself. In other words, things are not only what they are what you think they are. Let me explain it in another way that might be helpful and empowering for you. In the long run, your attitude toward things is likely to be more important than the things themselves. That's how powerful your mind is. That's how powerful your thinking is. This is why the stone of peaceful posture and forgiveness are so important. In the space between stimulus and response, you have what I mentioned earlier is free agency. In other words, between stimulus and response, there's all this space, this free agency for you to make a choice. You get to decide what you want to think. This is why Viktor Frankl referred to it as the last human freedom. I always include the word persistent when I speak on the topic of forgiveness. This is due to the fact that I firmly believe that forgiveness is not a one and done spiritual exercise. Rather, forgiveness is a daily discipline that allows you to free up and implement free agency within your mind. Forgiveness allows you to constructively use your mind to engage the battles of the present moment. My friends, that concludes our second stone. Now, let's move into our third stone, the stone of positive mental nutrition. The third stone, the stone of positive mental nutrition. And yes, I love this stone. I hope you do as well. This stone teaches the fundamental principle that what we focus our attention on tends to increase in our life. Let me say that again. Whatever you focus your attention on will increase in your life. If we think about a problem, the problem tends to increase. When we think about a solution or victory or success or opportunity, well, the solution, the success, the victory, they increase as well. The choice, sound familiar, is up to you. This is why the stones are complementary. They're meant to work together in your shepherd's pouch. The choice is always up to you. In the context of our ancient story, whereas everyone else on the battlefield was focused on the giant, David, well, he was focused on victory. In fact, it is all that David could talk about. In the chapter of the ancient text that records the battle of David and Goliath, it is incredible to read that David spoke about victory on 9 different occasions compared to the 2 mentions he made of Goliath. And get this, on the 2 occasions when David did mention Goliath, it was in the context of defeating him in battle. Once again, victory. It's all that this guy could talk about. By a mysterious law of creation, you tend to move in the direction of the thoughts and the expectations or beliefs you have about yourself. It's interesting to note, once again, in the context of David and Goliath, whereas everyone else on the battlefield was thinking about, talking about, expecting defeat, David was thinking about, talking about, expecting victory. What a contrast. In fact, David was so certain that he would be victorious in battle. In one conversation, he was talking about the reward he was going to get for defeating Goliath. I just love this guy. When your deepest and innermost thoughts are persistently positive, then a sense of positive expectancy about every season of your life and challenge you face is the natural result. You see, I teach nutrition in 2 ways. I teach nutrition as both a combination and integration of physical nutrition and mental nutrition. No amount of good thinking will compensate for a bad diet, yet no amount of healthy physical nutrition will compensate for negative, unhealthy self-talk. We have to ensure that we are consuming food, both mental food and physical food, that is building up our body and building up our life. You know, there's an amazing story that comes from the ancient warrior tradition of 2 wolves. Legend has it that in the soul of every warrior there were 2 wolves that were fighting for the attention of the warrior's mind. Who was going to win the battle? The wolf of courage or the wolf of fear? What do you think? What will be the dominant source of fuel the warrior would use to feed one wolf or the other? Well, you guessed it. They're going to use their mind. The warrior who focused their thoughts on the wolf of courage would essentially build up the courage wolf in their life and starve the fear wolf to the point where it was non-existent. I love the wisdom of that ancient story as well, because it reinforces this critical principle that we can now summarize in the brilliant words of Viktor Frankl. Remember, my friends, the last human freedom is right here, between your ears. Your ability to think for yourself. Now, as much as I love mental nutrition, we now have to accelerate into physical nutrition, because both are essential if our goal in life is to be victorious. We need both. So now let's bring our attention to the stone of proper physical nutrition. It is imperative that you fuel your body with a proper balance of protein, carbohydrate, and monosaturated fat. In other words, in order to optimize the time you spend exercising, which will be stone number 5, you need to support your body with good nutrition and hydration. A well-balanced diet of protein, seasonal fruits and vegetables, and lots of fresh water will create a chemical hormonal balance in your body that will increase your physical strength and positively influence your thinking. Yes, you heard me correctly. Food affects your thoughts. Your thoughts affect your food choices. You see why we have to look at nutrition as harmonious, as integrated. In other words, it must be holistic nutrition. You know, research has conclusively determined that when you consume physical food, it has a chemical hormonal effect on your body, either to your benefit or your detriment. It's the same thing with your mental nutrition. The thoughts that you think have a chemical hormonal effect on your brain, which means good thinking is good for your mind and your brain, and good physical nutrition is good for your body. As first responders, we simply have to have both. Let's talk about the essentials of good physical nutrition, because it can be rather easy. Here's some principles to get you started. Divide your plate. When you look at your plate, divide it into thirds. 1/3 of your plate should be protein. The remaining 2/3 of your plate should be carbohydrates. Those carbohydrate choices that make up 2/3 of your plate should be low glycemic, fresh and seasonal fruits and vegetables with an emphasis on leafy greens. Always include a few grams of healthy fat with each meal. Nuts, seeds, olive oil are great examples. Then drink between 3/4 and 1 gallon of fresh water. Reduce or eliminate sugar, soda, processed food, alcohol, and all narcotics. That is how we get started on the 4th stone of proper physical nutrition, which leads us right into our 5th and final stone, the stone of something all first responders learned during the academy, the importance of proper physical training. There is an intimate connection, as we've already discussed, between your body and your mind. When you physically exercise, change takes place both in your mind and in your body. In other words, your physicality affects your psychology. Your psychology will affect your physicality. Once again, 2 sides of the same coin. Your mind, your body, they're meant to work harmoniously, not antagonistically. Research has conclusively demonstrated that 20 minutes of aerobic exercise every day has a life-sustaining effect on both your body and your mind. Aerobic exercise is so important, my friends. For first responders, that means you, listen carefully. For you, I advocate a fitness program that focuses on compound multi-joint exercises at moderate to high intensity. For example, rather than a bicep curl, which will isolate one specific range of motion, one specific muscle in my arm, rather than a bicep curl, I advocate a pull-up or rope climbing or a ring row, an exercise that is compound multi-joint. This is very important because the compound multi-joint exercises mimic and reinforce movement patterns that the first responder is very likely to see within the course of their career. Also, these ranges of motion has a positive effect on the central nervous system, releasing growth hormone that significantly benefits the totality of the strength in your entire body. In other words, the range of motion of compound exercises benefit the body in a way that you can never achieve with an isometric or limited range of motion exercise. It's just not possible. My friends, we are on our fifth and final stone. This is a stone that all public safety, all first responders should be familiar with, something that we all learned in the academy, the importance of proper care of our body. In other words, good physical training is our fifth and final stone. There is an intimate connection between your body and your mind. When you exercise, change takes place, both in your physicality and in your psychology. One affects the other. Research has conclusively demonstrated that 20 minutes of aerobic exercise every day has a life-sustaining effect on both your physicality and your mental health. In other words, physical training benefits you physically and mentally. For first responders, I advocate a fitness program that focuses on compound multi-joint exercises at moderate to high levels of intensity. For example, rather than bicep curls, which isolate a specific muscle group of the arm, I recommend exercises such as pull-ups, rope climbing, or ring rows, all of which harmoniously develop a variety of joints and muscle groups in a unified fashion at the exact same time. This type of training also mimics and replicates the movement patterns that are essential to public safety and first responders. Plus, these exercises have been shown to support the release of growth hormone and have a positive influence on your central nervous system. Well, my friends, in concluding our time together today and momentarily, just momentarily putting on my law enforcement chaplain hat, I would be amiss if I did not mention that David's faith was his primary key to victory. Everyone on the battlefield on that fateful day looked at Goliath and saw an impossible situation. However, David focused on his faith and believed that God could make impossible situations entirely possible. This means that as long as you go through life with a gloomy, self-defeating mindset, you're bound to be a pessimist and will tend to gravitate toward a negative outlook on every challenge you face. However, when you realize that success is contingent upon a combination of faith and the 5 stones of victory, then you become an optimist. Just like David, you can look at any giant you ever face in your life and you can say to yourself with conviction, with certainty, I can do it. My friends, thank you for your time today, and please be safe out.